Hands off my
Caulipower, one of the original cool plants added into Plants vs. Zombies 2. It's basically like Hypno Shroom, but isn't single use and can hypnotize zombies anywhere on the map. Sounds pretty overpowered, right? Well, it does have a couple of drawbacks, like its very high sun cost and its extremely high recharge timer. So I thought, why not level Caulipower to the max level and try to solo the entire game with it? But before we do that, let me tell you all the rules. Only Caulipower, no power-ups or Zen Garden, skip all levels that force the use of another plant, pre-placed plants are fine, and lastly, coins earned throughout the challenge can be used to buy plant food, but no replaying levels to farm coins. Oh, and about 87% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Okay, let's start. In my opinion, the most difficult plant solo so far. Ancient Egypt starts with me planting one Caulipower in the middle lane to take care of these first two zombies, and the way it happens is that one gets hypnotized and takes out the other one. And this is something that happens throughout the entire challenge, and I never really figured out why. Like, you'll notice that my hypnotized zombies end up killing the other ones faster than the other ones can kill the hypnotized ones. But there isn't any special buff that the hypnotized ones get, so they should be the same exact zombie just fighting each other. But that aside, on day one, you're about to see the worst problem that happens with the Caulipower, and that's the fact that it just hits any zombie that's on the map randomly, which this time it cost me to lose a lawnmower, but since the lawnmowers are infinite for these levels, it's okay. And with that, day one was beat. Day three, I first had to quickly shovel the one cabbage pole and two sunflowers that the game gives us, quickly planting a Caulipower right after. Another pretty cool thing about the Caulipower, if it hypnotizes a zombie carrying plant food, the plant food drops immediately. And this is a very helpful feature in the later worlds, as sometimes it's the only thing that allows me to win. But this has definitely got to be the most annoying thing about the Caulipower, where instead of shooting the zombie that's eating it, it'll shoot just a random zombie on the map, in the end getting eaten by the zombie. But while the rest of this level finishes up, let me go over the stats of the max level Caulipower. Its sun cost goes from 250 to 150. Its recharge rate, even though it goes down, it's only 10 seconds, going from 45 to 35. But a semi-good thing is that its starting recharge, which means when the game begins, its recharge timer is 10 seconds, which allows us to get down at least one Caulipower pretty fast. Its health, like most plants, goes from 300 to 900. With its mastery levels, there's about a 20% chance to boost on placement, and it also has the pierce buff with the masteries, but normally that changes the damage of a plant. But Caulipower doesn't do any damage, so I have no idea what it does with this guy. Let me know if you know in the comments. And with that, day 3 was beat, and now we skip straight to day 7 because days 4, 5, and 6 don't allow us to use the Caulipower. But quickly going back to its stats, it actually has 2 more buffs that are unique to the Caulipower. One, normally at level 1, if it hits a zombie, it heals it to 50% HP, and at max level, it heals it to 100% HP. But this doesn't actually really do anything since we're not dealing any damage to the zombies at any point anyways. And the final buff is a percentage chance of what zombie it hits, ranging from basic zombie, a unique zombie like the Pharaoh, and the Gargantuar zombies. But these percentages can get a little confusing, so all you really need to know is at the higher level the Caulipower, the more chance it has to hit a better zombie like a Gargantuar or a unique zombie. And the Caulipower's sun cost and recharge rate are the only things that really hold it back, but they hold it back a lot. But that aside, day 7 of Ancient Egypt was beat. Day 8 starts with these 2 explorers walking in that actually got flicked right away by the Caulipower's plant food as it boosted right as I planted it. I later on had a hypnotized zombie in the bottom lane that got completely torched by the other explorer that was coming in, but thankfully the explorer got hypnotized as well. And with the pretty minimal amount of zombies sent within the final wave, these 4 Caulipower were able to beat all of day 8. Day 9 at 1 flag level with me quickly getting a plant down, which is pretty easily able to handle the early zombies by itself, as I then later on get a second one down. And aside from its seed packet recharge, the Caulipower also has a cooldown when it attacks. I couldn't really find or kind of gauge what the exact time was that it takes for it to recharge its attack, but throughout this entire challenge I guesstimated that it was somewhere between 5 to 10 seconds. And I actually did lose a lawnmower on this level as well in the very middle lane, and this is something you're going to notice a lot because at first I don't have many Caulipowers down, so sometimes zombies leak through. through. But then as I get more Caulipower down throughout the level, less zombies leak through. Day 10 was another 1 flag level, and of course sometimes the Caulipowers just ignore the zombies in the front and end up hitting the ones in the very back, so it starts seeming like I'm about to lose a lawnmower or two, but then the Caulipowers bring it back a little later on. But then within the same level, you'll see things like this happening, where this one cone head in the top middle lane is free and open, but the Caulipowers just continually choose to hypnotize zombies that are way behind it. And even after being given so many chances, the cone head in the end makes it to the lawnmower, taking out the lawnmower, even though it shouldn't have been a problem at all. And keep in mind, these are the easiest levels of the entire challenge, and this bad RNG stays consistent throughout the entire run. Day 12, technically a no flag level as there's none up there, and I never really figured out if this was just a visual glitch or if they just forgot to put the flag there, because there is technically a final wave within this level. And once again, a lot of zombies that were very up front did not get hit at all, and instead the zombies in the back did, so I had to use a plant food to take care of the zombies in the very front, with that beating day 12. Day 13 had 1 flag and 2 columns of mold colonies in the back, and this isn't much of a problem because the Caulipower has full map range, and even if somehow the zombies make it onto the mold colonies, they're still able to be hit. And this time the RNG was pretty good, so the zombies didn't make it too far, and with 5 plants placed down, day 13 was beat. And you might have noticed in my previous videos that whatever plant I'm using at max level, I tend to just spam use its name. Like for example, in the 2-hour chomper video, I couldn't even tell you how many times I said the word chomper. So you might notice me saying words like collie or plant or it instead of the full Caulipower, just to try and sound less repetitive. But that aside, day 14 had 2 flags, our very first level to do so, but it also showed what makes the Caulipower so powerful, and that's it could hypnotize even the strongest of zombies like the coffin zombie. So it's not really the health or the attack of the zombie that matters against Caulipower, it's more the amount of zombies that are being sent. Let's say for example, there's a level that sends 20 gargantuars, and then there's another level that sends 50 basic zombies. In reality, the more difficult level should be the gargantuar level, but because of how Caulipower works, the gargantuar level is actually easier for it. And day 15 was actually our first level with 3 flags, and we also had to protect these 3 endangered sunflowers. They're definitely a nice help in the sun production, but as the Caulipower's recharge is so long, we had a lot of sun stacked up that we couldn't do anything with. Oh yeah, you also might have noticed there that there's another strategy I was implementing into this run that I don't really implement with other plants, and that was using the plant food to restock the recharge of the Caulipower. And this is truly one of the greatest weapons within this run, and you'll see me spamming it basically in every level. Day 16 we went back down to 2 flags, and the beginning pace of the zombies that were being sent was pretty slow, and by the time it picked up I'd already had 3 Caulipowers down, so the first big wave was instantly taken down, and then by the final wave I had 5 Caulipowers, so it was even easier, making day 16 very simple. Day 17 we went back down to 1 flag, and then there's also the challenge where we could only have 14 plants planted. Well, it was more of a non-challenge challenge, since it's basically impossible for me to get 14 Caulipowers down within 1 level. And again, even with these 4 planted down, this one cone head in the top lane almost made it to the very end, but then one of them clutched up in the bottom lane and got it hypnotized right before it reached the end. By the time the final wave came in, we already had a couple of hypnotized zombies on our side, so about half the wave was taken out by them, and then the other half was taken out by the Caulipower. Day 18, maybe the easiest levels of this run, because I get to just prep my Caulipower and then sit back and relax. Day 19, 1 flag, 2 mold colonies, and then once again the non-challenge of only having 16 plants to plant. And as the zombies come in very thin numbers at the start, I'm pretty easily able to get down a second Caulipower. And as we reached the final wave, it was getting a little scary with the RNG and what zombies were being hit. But thankfully, as Explorer was about to reach the mold colonies, I got hypnotized, and then I also plant fooded to take care of the rest of the lingering zombies. Day 20, I had to protect these 4 sunflowers, and the main threats this level are definitely the explorers, because if the same thing as last level happens and an explorer gets very far, it's definitely going to take out a sunflower. But as long as RNG is on our side and the explorers get hypnotized, this level shouldn't be much of a problem either, since we have a pretty good amount of sun as well. And the first big wave was beaten pretty easily, and as the final wave brought in 2 explorers in the top middle lane and bottom middle lane, it started looking a little scary because the top one wasn't getting hypnotized, but I got a plant food and plant fooded a Caulipower right away, which took it out. Day 21, no special challenges, resources, and we went back down to 1 flag. And this level has a pretty good amount of gravestones in it, and usually the gravestones are pretty bad for the plants, but for the Caulipower, they're actually pretty good because once the zombie is hypnotized, sometimes they just leave the map without damaging any other zombie. But what the gravestones allow the zombies to do is attack them, and then the zombies get stalled until another zombie comes into frame, and then the zombies are actually able to hit the enemies, which allows them to be helpful instead of just walking off the map without doing anything. And the final wave of day 21 sent in a pretty mediocre amount of zombies, and as this last bucket head got hypnotized, we beat day 21. Day 22, an 18 plant limit and 1 column of mold colonies, and also 2 flags. And another semi-unfortunate thing about the Caulipower and its full map range is that we can't really stall the beginning of the level that we can with plants that don't have full map range. And this is basically just due to the fact that the zombies get hit right away and the next wave is sent whenever the zombie is hypnotized. And even though I think the stalling would help the Caulipower a lot, I think that the full map range helps us more than it doesn't. So I can't complain too much about it. And ironically to what I just said, this level was slow enough and had enough plant food that I was able to get 5 down by the time we reached the first flag. And this was very helpful as some of the zombies actually got pretty close. And this top cone head even got very close to eating the Caulipower, but thankfully it was hypnotized last second. And when the final wave came in, the top 3 lanes were already pretty set because we had cone head defending us, but the bottom 2 lanes were a bit of a problem, but as they didn't have too many zombies, they were also easily hypnotized, allowing us to take down day 22. Day 23 again was 2 flags and had a pretty abrupt start with these sandstorms, and one of the zombies from the sandstorms almost made it to the end but was hypnotized at the last second, which also allowed it to take out the zombie that was right behind it. But then within the final wave, we saw our very first Gargantuar. But as I mentioned earlier, they aren't a problem and get hypnotized right away by the Caulipowers. And this of course made day 23 very easy. Day 24 was a prepper defenses level. And this is actually the last level that we play of Ancient Egypt, which means that we're able to beat all of Ancient Egypt with the max level Caulipower. But tensions start increasing within Day 1 of Pirate Seas, 1 flag, and although it should have been simple, the Caulipower once again was having atrocious RNG, and the zombie in the bottom middle lane was able to pretty easily make it all the way to the lawnmower in the end. But thankfully, by the final wave, we did have 4 of them down, so this lowered the odds of bad RNG by a lot, and we're able to beat Day 1 without any more mistakes. Day 2, contrasting to Day 1, sent in very minimal amount of zombies in the beginning, so RNG wasn't even in the question, and by the time multiple zombies were being sent at once, I had already had 3 Caulipower down. And this basically let me breeze past that final wave with only this 1 basic zombie almost making it to my Caulipower. As it was one of the final zombies, it was hypnotized and we beat Day 2. Day 3, we're still on 1 flag, but this level was actually sending in multiple zombies at once. So the zombies are actually making it pretty far even in the earlier stages, but the final wave itself was pretty mid and all the zombies were quickly taken down. Day 4 was the first level on Pirate Seas with 2 flags, and the zombies were coming in pretty slow, but we made it to the first big wave really fast, which sent in a burst of zombies. But I did get some pretty good RNG with the hypnosis, and the zombies in front were the ones getting hypnotized. And so I was able to survive this first big wave. And by the time the final big wave came in, I had 5 Caulipowers down with some hypnotized zombies already in the map, and this left basically 4 zombies for us to take care of, and it was very easy to do. Day 5, we stayed at 2 flags, and at first the amount of zombies being sent was pretty minuscule, but then seconds later, even before the first big wave came in, a ton of zombies were sent, and then even more were sent within the first big wave. And this actually got a little scary, so I was forced to use a plant food to take care about 5 of them. But even with that plant food usage, a ton of zombies made it all the way to my Caulipower, even taking one out and taking a lawnmower with them, forcing me to use 1 more plant food on the middle Caulipower, who eventually also got eaten because it didn't flick away the zombie that was eating it, and that zombie in turn took the lawnmower as well. And then within the final wave came the wrath of this other conehead in the bottom middle lane, who took another Caulipower and made it all the way to the lawnmower as well. But as I had still 3 of my plants left and the zombie numbers had completely dwindled down, we were actually able to beat Day 5 on this attempt. But just remember, this was still Day 5 and we're already struggling. Day 6 also only had 2 flags, but this time the 2 flags came with much more tension because I didn't know if a lot of zombies were going to be sent like last time. And thankfully, the numbers this time in the beginning were a lot smaller, so I was able to get down more Caulipower than last time. But even then, I had some bad RNG with the top lane and bottom lane seagull zombies, with the top lane one being hypnotized last second, but the bottom one actually made it all the way to the lawnmower. But even though the lawnmower was taken, we still had 4 of our plants on the map, planting a 6th one as the final wave approached, which actually plant fooded, taking out a lot of the zombies. And with the nice combo of our 6 Caulipower and not too many zombies being sent in the final wave, day 6 was beat with less stress than day 5. Day 7, again, only 2 flags, and a very lenient amount of zombies being sent within the beginning areas. We're able to place down 4 Caulipower by the time that the first flag came in. And this first big wave was also very nice because it didn't have any speedy seagulls or the swinging pirate zombies until a little later on by the time we had our 5th Caulipower down. And we also had a decent amount of plant food, so I used one as this one zombie in the middle was getting a little close. So that first big but slow horde of zombies was pretty easily beaten. And then came in the final wave, which actually brought in a lot of pirate swinging zombies and even more behind them. But with our 6 Caulipowers and still 2 plant food in hand, this level was actually beaten pretty easily towards the end, leaving just these 2 barrels that we couldn't really do much about and wait for them to break open, which left us with 2 imps that got easily taken care of as well. Day 9, still 2 flags, and even though the early game was pretty easy, there actually came a problem within the first big wave, which was these 3 pirate swinging zombies, who even though I'd gotten down 4 Caulipowers, my RNG stayed atrocious, and all 3 of these pirates actually made it all the way to the end, taking 3 of my lawnmowers. And I got a little worried as the second wave of the swinging zombies were sent, but thankfully these guys were hypnotized right away. And the final wave itself was actually really easy, as it was only these 3 pirate swinging zombies and not much of the other ones, because my hypnotized zombies in the top lanes took care of all the other zombies. Wow, I just said the word zombies a lot. But that aside, day 9 was beat. Day 10, we had now gone up to 3 flags, but the first 3 zombies were all sent one by one up until the first flag was sent, which allowed me to get down a second Caulipower. But somehow the first big wave only had 3 to 4 zombies in it. And then the second big wave wasn't that bad either, with some seagull zombies and a couple of basic zombies. But right after the second big wave, a new zombie was introduced, which was the imp cannon. And these guys aren't too annoying early on, but in a later level, they are very detrimental to the Caulipower. And this is mainly due to the reason that we can't hit the cannon in any way unless a zombie in its lane was hypnotized, which technically always has to be a seagull zombie because the pirate swinging zombies can't ever make it to the cannons. And this basically makes it to where we have to wait until the cannon explodes and spawns in 3 to 4 more imps. Day 11, however, we went back down to 2 flags with very minimal spawns in the beginning, so we're able to get 3 Caulipower down before the first bigger horde of zombies was sent in. And also I think it's pretty funny, like in the top lane, the hypnotized zombies just disappear right as they're about to jump into the water. This level was also surprising because by the time that the first big wave had appeared, I was able to get down 5 Caulipower with the help of plant food. And I almost, even with these 5, lost that top middle one, but thankfully last second, the zombies that were approaching it got hypnotized. But then the seagull zombie in the middle lane made it all the way and kept eating away at my Caulipower. And of course, my RNG with the hypnosis was terrible, so I had to plant another Caulipower right in front of it to tank the damage. But even this failed, as that one Caulipower that I planted got eaten, and then right after, that first Caulipower got eaten as well. But we did thankfully hypnotize it before it took a lawnmower, giving us some extra safety for later on. And the final wave of this level sent in a lot of zombies. And like usual, my RNG was going terribly, so I had to start using plant food to take care of the zombies that were all getting close. And with the help of those, only these 2 imp cannons were left, and day 11 had been beat. Day 14, I prepped Caulipowers. Day 15 only had 2 flags, but it's definitely one of the scarier levels because we have to protect these flowers in the back from being trampled on. And many times in the other levels, we've seen a zombie make it that far pretty easily if my RNG is bad enough. So my first goal was to immediately get a column of Caulipower right in front of the flowers just for an extra layer of defense. And I was able to do so a little after the first big wave. And by the time the final big wave was about to be sent in, I had 6 Caulipower down. And these were basically able to demolish this last wave. This was also the first level that wasn't a prep your defenses level, where I had 7 Caulipower down on the map at once. Kinda just showing that the levels were getting longer and more difficult as we went on. We're actually even able to get an 8th one down because of the imp cannons. But right after this, day 15 was beat. Day 16 had 1 flag, and it was a pretty cool one because we had to protect these 2 spring beans in the middle from being trampled. And the first couple of zombies were very easily hypnotized as they came in one at a time. But right after, things started getting a little complicated as the Caulipower weren't weren't firing fast enough. But then I had an idea. Why not just plant food the spring bean to take care of all the zombies that were in the middle 2 lanes? So this is exactly what I did whenever it was needed and it felt too overcrowded, allowing me to beat day 16 pretty easily. But then came in day 17 with maybe the worst type of challenge for the Caulipower. And it's the challenge where we have to kill a certain amount of zombies in a certain amount of time. And for some reason, whenever the zombies get hypnotized, it doesn't count towards this counter. The only thing that counts towards this is if one of my hypnotized zombies eats another zombie. And even worse, if one of my Caulipower's plant foods, the zombies that get flicked away don't count as zombies dying either. And I have literally no idea what the reason for this is. I think it might just be a bug. But either way, a pretty big wave of zombies was sent in, so I was a little confident that we might be able to get that full counter by hypnotizing enough zombies and then having them eat the other ones. But just as we're about to meet that goal, the amount of zombies completely dwindled and it took down my counter from full to less than half. And a little later, almost to nothing. And I almost gave up here as I paused and almost restarted, but then I realized that there's still one more big wave left. And it's looking pretty good as we're pretty close to the end of that counter and there's still all these zombies left. And as the number of zombies were dwindling and we're almost there, I panicked and I launched a lawnmower, which actually helped me meet the goal. But we had another problem. The zombies in the bottom of the lane almost made it to the end, so I had to plant another Caulipower, and then luckily the Caulipower on the top got that imp last second. And this very much helped me recuperate, eventually beating day 17. But after that last atrocious level came in maybe the worst level of Pirate Seas, day 22, where of course first we have to prep our defenses. And you might be thinking, how is this a bad level when you get to plant 4 columns of Caulipower and all you have to deal with is imps? And in theory, you'd be right, because this level should be easy with the amount of Caulipower that we have. But for some reason, all the Caulipower just forget how to coordinate in this level and end up using and wasting all their hypnosis on like 4 zombies at a time. And for some reason, whenever imps are launched right onto the Caulipower, they don't hypnotize them right away and have to calibrate for a couple of seconds, so they always end up taking some hits from the imps, which leads to the slow but surely dwindling numbers of my Caulipower. And before we reach the final wave, we'd basically already lost 2 full columns of the Caulipower. But it gets much worse, because these imps end up taking the 3rd column, and even with the help of plant food, the number of imps is still crazy. And this first mega horde of imps ends up taking all the lawnmowers, with me only having 1 Caulipower left. And truthfully, this Caulipower can't do anything against these imps, so I inevitably end up losing for the first time in this challenge on day 22. But we haven't completely lost yet, because I can still try again, of course. On the second attempt, I tried a different approach of only planting 2 columns of the Caulipower to maybe try and give them more time against the imps. And it seemed to be working at first, because none of the Caulipowers were taking unnecessary damage. But as the number of imps drastically increased, they definitely started making it to my plants and started biting away, which led to even worse results, because they were able to take out 3 of my lawnmowers before I even made it to that final wave, completely taking me out before the final wave as well. So the third attempt, I switched it up even more with 3 columns of Caulipower instead of the 2 or the 4. And right as I reached the final wave, I lost one of my lawnmowers, which is detrimental because I need all my lawnmowers for that final horde of the imps. Because if I don't have all the lawnmowers, a big line of imps just completely gets through all my defenses. On the 4th attempt, I did 4 columns of Caulipowers with an additional 2, using up all my sun right from the beginning. And those front 2 were basically instantly taken out. Then as we approached the final wave, most of my Caulipowers had already been taken out. And once again, I had lost. So for right now, I'll be skipping over this level, but don't worry, because this doesn't mean it's a loss, because I can still come back to it, since if you remember, I can still use my coins to buy plant food. But since I knew I was going to have to buy a lot of plant food with coins within this run, I decided to not use any of it on my first complete run, and instead save up my coins until the very end, where I knew all the levels that needed them, and then strategically come back and only use the amount of plant food and coins that I need. This way I can maximize the amount of levels that the Caulipower is able to defeat. Day 23 was also a scary one, because there's one flag. We had to protect these flowers in the middle-ish area from being trampled on, and worst of all, we had to beat 8 zombies in under 10 seconds. But on this attempt, that last challenge isn't the problem, and more so are the flowers in the middle, because for some reason I decided to plant a Caulipower in that bottom lane, even though the seagulls can't trample the flowers there, and this allowed the zombies that were approaching in the middle to trample the flowers. On the second attempt, I decided not to plant any Caulipower in that bottom lane because it wasn't needed since it was only seagull zombies, and instead prioritized prioritize the upper lanes. But there was another problem this time. All the zombies in the final wave had already gone away, and I didn't reach the defeat 8 zombies in 10 seconds challenge. On the third attempt, I made another oopsie because I had one plant food, and usually I use the plant food to recharge the Caulipower seed packet to quickly plant a fourth one, but for some reason this time I decided to use it to plant food this middle Caulipower, and with horrific RNG I wasn't able to get the zombie in the bottom middle lane carrying the plant food, and was able to make it over and trample my flowers. On the fourth attempt, none of the zombies even got close to the flowers, but once again the final wave had been sent in and I didn't even get close to beating the challenge, so I'd lost for a fourth time in a row. But I truly believed that this level was actually possible, so I gave it one last shot. I quickly got 2 of my Caulipowers down, and this time correctly using my plant food I recharged the seed packet to get my fourth one down as well, and this meant all the flowers were basically protected, and all that was left was beating the 8 zombies in under 10 seconds. And the bar had gotten pretty close to the end, and I realized I could do one more thing: launch my lawnmower and get the last few zombies, and this helped me reach the goal, thankfully beating day 23 on my 5th attempt. And now we're on the last level that we play of Pirate Seas, which has 2 flags, and we have to protect these 2 spring beans in the top and bottom lanes. And I'd honestly thought this would be easy at first, because all the spring beans have to do to dodge the seagulls is duck down, and then basically the only thing to worry about is the pirate swinging zombies. But on this very first attempt I didn't realize that a pirate swinging zombie had jumped onto a spring bean on the bottom lane, so the spring bean fell asleep and then the seagull was able to eat it, taking me down on this first attempt. On the second attempt something very similar almost happened, but this time I made sure to plant food to wake up the spring bean. But there was another problem: the imp cannons, which one of the imps got taken out, but right as I was about to plant food to take out the other ones, they were faster than me and ate the spring bean, beating me one more time. On the third attempt something very similar almost happened, but this time I was able to plant food to take out the imps, leaving only these 2 cannons left. And you can see in the bottom left that I'd already selected my plant food just in case that I needed it, and as the imp cannons launched, this bottom spring bean was sleeping, so I had to plant food it right away. But there was another problem: the front imps got sent back more and were eating it again, so I had to plant food again. But then once again I had to plant food for a third time to take out the final remaining imps, leaving now only this one imp beating all of Pirate Seas. Next up, comparatively to the Pirate Seas, even Wild West is a difficult world for Caulipower, and you'll start to see what I mean later on, as this first level only had 1 flag and a couple of zombies in the beginning, so I was able to get down my second Caulipower by the time that a couple more zombies were being sent in. And this level in itself was pretty short, because by the final wave I'd only had 3 Caulipowers down. I could have planted more with my plant food, but I decided to just save it, as we really didn't need it, and day 1 was beat. Day 2, again, only 1 flag, with not too many zombies being sent. A pretty funny feature was if the dynamite zombie gets hypnotized, its dynamite actually still stays lit and it launches back even though it's hypnotized. And this is actually pretty good for us, because this gives the dynamite zombie more time and other zombies more time to come in, and so the dynamite zombie can fight them off if need be. So with minimal zombies and some pretty funny functions, day 2 was beat very easily. Day 3, although similarly it only had 1 flag, it was actually a pretty annoying level. And that's mainly due to the introduction of the piano zombie, because for some reason, even if the piano zombie gets hypnotized, the zombies still stay dancing. And technically I guess this does make sense, because the piano zombie is still playing the piano and the zombies probably still hear the same thing, so they keep dancing. And even though we did lose 2 lawnmowers, we still beat day 3 on the first attempt. Day 5 was the first level with 2 flags in the Wild West, and this first hypnotized zombie was able to take out the second normal zombie that came in, which then allowed the Caulipower to attack the Conehead. And as the first big wave came in, I got down my 3rd and 4th Caulipower with the use of a plant food, and these guys were needed because there was a hefty amount of zombies sent within this wave. And the top lane ones actually made it all the way to my plant, so I had to use a plant food power to take care of them. And luckily the plant food RNG was on my side, so it did get rid of them instead of some that were in the back. And then the final wave came in, which brought in a pretty good amount of zombies, but at that time I also had a lot of hypnotized zombies on my side, which helped lessen the numbers by a lot, and then I just used the plant food to beat the rest of the zombies. Day 6, I prepped defenses. Day 7 had 2 flags, but before the first flag had even been sent, there weren't too many zombies, so I was able to get down 3 Caulipower with an additional 4th by the time that the first one had been sent in. And this first one brought in a pretty decent amount of zombies, but I had some pretty good RNG, and I was able to continuously get the zombies that were most far up front, which led me to easily beat it, and then the final wave came in. And similar to day 5, I already had some pretty strong hypnotized zombies, which made the final wave decently easy. Day 10 of the Wild West I would describe as the start of the apocalypse. apocalypse. This is the level that everything goes wrong and I truly now have to start strategizing. And this is only due to one reason: the introduction of the chicken and chicken wrangler zombies, which if they get hypnotized, all the chickens of course are still on your side as well. And this is what I thought would happen normally, but I didn't think of this one other thing, which was if a hypnotized zombie like the one in the very middle lane was able to attack a chicken wrangler before I even got the hypnosis off, which is exactly what happened because the chicken wrangler was off screen, so my Caulipower couldn't hit it, but the hypnotized zombie, who technically, even though it's off screen, can still hit the other zombies coming in, did hit it, and all the chickens got released, which allowed them to take one of my lawnmowers, and then a second chicken wrangler released more chickens and they made it all the way to the end. So I tried again, and the same thing happened. The one zombie that was hypnotized in the middle made it to a chicken wrangler off screen, and all the chickens got released. And the chickens themselves, of course, are a nightmare to the Caulipower because the Caulipower have to hypnotize all of them, which is basically impossible. So our only option is to not let these chickens get released, or save our lawnmowers for the end and then release all the chickens. So I had to start coming up with strategies, and one was just plant footing the Caulipower and flicking the chicken wranglers off the map before they even had a chance. But of course, there's too many of them, and the one in the middle got all its chickens released and made it all the way to the end for a second time. On my third attempt, I realized something. Since the only zombie that was a threat to us at first was that one in the very middle that kept procking the chicken wrangler, all I had to do was just plant food and flick it off the map. This way, it's not hypnotized and it can't hit the chicken wrangler that's coming in. But then there's another problem. The chicken wrangler itself gets hypnotized, and then its chickens end up hitting the zombies that are off the map, procking even more chicken wranglers, taking basically all my lawnmowers. But there's an even bigger problem, because when you try to plant food the Caulipower against the chickens, for some reason the chickens don't get flicked off the map and instead just get pushed back a couple of feet, which once again allows them to take me down. On the fourth attempt, I felt like I knew what I needed to do, which is basically just plant food at the right moments to take out all the important zombies that could proc the chicken wranglers. And that's exactly what I did by plant fooding this first Caulipower to get rid of that middle zombie, and this time I also used a plant food to get rid of that chicken wrangler in the middle so it couldn't proc the other ones. And right after, I'd gotten another plant food, but there were two more chicken wranglers on the screen, and the top one almost got procced by the zombie, so I had to quickly plant food, which took both of them out, thankfully. But now there was another chicken wrangler on screen, and I had to pray that it got hypnotized and set the zombie in front of it, and thankfully that is what happened. And I also got lucky with the fact that there weren't any other chicken wranglers coming in behind it. And right as we're about to reach the final wave, there were just too many zombies on the screen, and somehow two of the chicken wranglers got procced, releasing all their chickens. And I tried my best to preserve all the lawnmowers that I could before the final wave came in, and thankfully I was able to preserve 3 of them, leaving me with only 2 lanes that I had to protect. But something even greater happened. There were no chicken wranglers sent within this final wave, and with this one last plant food, most of the zombies were flicked away, allowing me to finally take down day 10. But this obviously was the easiest level that has chickens in it. Day 11, thankfully no chickens, but it did have a 500 sun limit, which caps us at only 3 Caulipower. But as it was a 1 flag level with minimal zombies, and even the final wave itself only had coneheads as the strongest zombie, day 11 was easily taken down. Day 13 had 2 flags, and I placed my Caulipower on the minecarts at first because I realized that they could be helpful, and if any zombie got close to the Caulipower, I could just move them away. And within the first wave, there was a new zombie introduced, which was the mechanical bull. And the mechanical bulls can be a little dangerous because they're pretty speedy, and once they stop, they launch their imp. And since this time I could have hypnotized the bull or the imp ended up taking the lawnmower. But as the final wave was sent in, we had some pretty strong zombies on our side, which made this pretty easy in itself. And day 13 was beat, but then came in day 14, which is the second level that the chickens show up in. And this time the amount of chicken wranglers is a lot greater than in day 10. The first chicken wrangler jumped into that top middle lane and it got procced by my hypnotized conehead, which led to me losing the upper 3 lawnmowers. And then things did cool down a little bit, with only 1 chicken wrangler being sent in those upper 3 lanes and then 1 in the bottom 3 lanes. And the upper chicken wrangler got hypnotized, releasing its chickens, but then there's another chicken wrangler in the top lane, which led to its chickens getting released and taking me down in that top lane. On the second attempt, somehow the same exact chicken wrangler in that top middle lane got procced, and this time I literally do not have any idea how I got procced since there's a zombie right in front of it, because even though I hypnotized the conehead in that lane, that zombie in front of it should have gotten taken out first instead of the chicken wrangler being hit. But I was still trying as I plant fooded one of my Caulipower to take out these 2 chicken wranglers, then using a second plant food to take out the other chicken wranglers that were coming in, right after using a third one for even more chicken wranglers, and then even a 4th one because there was just too many of them. But then came in a problem, which was the final wave. If you remember, day 10's final wave didn't have any chicken wranglers in it, but day 14's does, and they don't come in by themselves, but instead with a lot more zombies that mess up the RNG of my Caulipowers. And once again, I tried plant fooding, but of course the plant food for some reason sucks against the chickens and they made it all the way through. On the third attempt, my RNG completely just gave up as this regular basic zombie in the bottom middle lane made it all the way through to the lawnmower. And simultaneously, chickens on the top 2 lanes made it to the lawnmowers as well. And as I'd only gone through the first big wave by this time, I realized the attempt was cooked and decided to just restart by myself. On the 4th attempt, I actually didn't have a plant food to get rid of that top middle lane cone head, so I decided to just launch the lawnmower since I didn't want it to be hypnotized and hit the chicken wrangler behind it. But this, of course, is a risky strategy and only works if I don't let any more chicken wranglers out. And it actually wasn't even that top middle lane that I lost in, it was the bottom lane in which this one chicken made it all the way to the mower, and that mower hit another chicken wrangler, which let out a big horde of more chickens, and there is basically no way that a Caulipower can defend against those. On the 5th attempt, I once again launched the mower to get rid of the cone head in the top middle lane, but I was unable to prevent chickens from getting loose, allowing them to take 2 more of my mowers, inevitably making it to the house one more time. And at this point, I decided that this level was still possible, but I was just wasting my time for right now. And like day 22 of Pirate Seas, I'll be leaving this level behind and coming back to it at the end. So, skipping to day 15, a level that only had 1 flag, and I could only lose 2 plants. But it seemed like there were no chickens on this level, and it was just the most basic zombies with a mix of the piano zombie. And the final wave itself wasn't too difficult either, which allowed me to beat day 15 very easily. Day 16 had 2 flags, and I had to protect this one walnut on the minecart. And this wasn't too difficult as I was just shifting the walnut to the lane that didn't have any zombies in it, or lanes that had hypnotized zombies in them. There was a little scare in the bottom lane as a zombie made it all the way to my Caulipower, so I used the plant food to get rid of it. But then with my atrocious RNG, the top middle lane cone head made it all the way to the lawnmower. And then right after, another zombie in the bottom lane actually made it to the lawnmower as well. And then one more zombie in the middle lane. Yep, this easy level did seem to be falling apart. But even with all these lost lawnmowers, we somehow were able to hypnotize and flick all the zombies away, beating day 16. Day 17, another scary one, because the flowers that we have to protect from being trampled on are back and are basically in the center of the map. So of course I have to plant the Caulipower right in front of the flowers, and I almost lost in the bottom lane, but the Caulipower was able to get it last second. And as soon as I got plant food, I was using it to insta recharge my Caulipower seed packet, trying to get down 5 before the final wave was sent in, and I was successful in this, with actually an additional 3 plant food to use on the Caulipower. But the final wave itself was actually so easy that I didn't even need to use any of the plant food to take down day 17. But day 18 was another monstrous level, which in first we have to prep our defenses. But right after starting, a crazy amount of chicken wranglers are sent, and all the chickens just start going and eating all my Caulipower. And as they started taking my lawnmowers as well, this chicken in the bottom lane was able to defeat me before the halfway point was even reached. I knew this level was going to be hard, so on the second attempt, I did the same placements, but this time I instantly used the plant food on the approaching chicken wranglers in the beginning. But even spamming plant food, the chicken wranglers still kept on getting procced. And to be honest, they took me out very easily once again. So this is another level that we're going to put up on the rack and come back to later on. And even though this level seems basically impossible even with plant food, I promise this one is possible and has probably the coolest way of beating it. Day 19 had 2 flags and I could only lose 2 plants, and things got a little hectic after the first big wave, but I did have 4 plant food in stock, which I ended up using 1 to insta recharge a seed packet. And I also had RNG on my side because the hypnosis targeted the dynamite zombies that were attacking the Caulipower, but as this one zombie in the top middle lane started attacking, I had to use a plant food to get rid of it. As the final wave came in, I basically just spammed a couple of plant foods because I had no other use for them, allowing me to beat day 19. Day 21, we had to protect the flowers from being trampled on again, and this level starts off slow but quickly gets hectic. And thankfully your hypnotized zombies stepping over the flowers don't count as the flowers being trampled on, because if that was the case, this level would have been impossible. And as the final wave came in, things were actually looking pretty bad as I only had 3 Caulipowers down, but thankfully I did have a plant food at my disposal that worked out perfectly. But now we're on day 23, a pretty bad level. On day 23, we have to protect flowers from being trampled on again, but also we can only lose 2 plants. And on this first attempt, I had horrific RNG, and the zombie in the bottom lane ate through my Caulipower, and I got a plant food last second, but I wasn't able to use it. I then tried to launch a mower, but I was too late and it trampled the flowers. On the second attempt, things got even worse because I realized that this level also had chicken wranglers, which very quickly trampled the flowers. The third attempt, basically the same exact thing happened, and this was also one of the levels that needed me to buy plant food, so I put put it up on the board and I'll be revisiting it later. And you would think that things might get easier on day 24, but actually this got worse. Because one, we had to protect these 3 walnuts on the minecarts, and this level also had chickens. And after a couple of attempts, I put this level up on the board as well. And this was the last level of Wild West. And we now had 5 levels that we have to revisit by the end. But that aside, next step is Frostbite Caves, maybe my least favorite world of this entire challenge, and it's mainly due to the reason that the snowstorms exist and the Caulipowers don't have any way of unfreezing the other Caulipower. But day 1 was pretty simple as there were no snowstorms. Day 2 did introduce the snowstorms, and you can see one of my Caulipowers on the bottom was half frozen, and last time with the laser beam we realized that we could just shovel the half frozen plants and get our sun back, but this isn't really beneficial for the Caulipower since its recharge is so long. The main purpose of shoveling was getting our sun back and trying to replant another plant with that sun, but that strategy doesn't really work for Caulipower, so it's best just let it do whatever it can and then let it freeze if it does. But thankfully none of them froze this time, and I was able to use a plant food to get rid of the last couple of zombies. Day 4 we went up to 2 flags, and the game sent in a pretty large amount of zombies right away, but thankfully my RNG was pretty good until it wasn't, and I lost the top lane Caulipower right before I was about to plant food it, and then this conehead in the bottom middle lane made it all the way as well. But by the time we're approaching the final wave, we had 4 Caulipower down, and these guys were slowly but surely hypnotizing all the zombies. And lastly, I used the plant food to get rid of the remaining zombies at the end, beating day 4. Day 6, however, we could see the true pain brought in by the snowstorms, because at first all these zombies were sent in, and of course the Caulipower kept on missing the zombie in the very front, and even with the second one added and then a third one shortly after, the zombies still made it all the way to the lawnmower. And as the first big wave was about to be sent in, a windstorm came in, half freezing my plants, and then 10 seconds later another one came in, freezing them fully, and these basically then became useless. And I quickly got down another Caulipower thinking maybe this was still redeemable, but as the number of zombies became apparent I realized this was not possible, and then the 4th Caulipower got frozen as well. So of course the zombies made it all the way to the end pretty easily. The second attempt started off pretty similarly, but some zombies in the top middle lane and the very middle lane made it all the way to the lawnmowers, and at the same time one of my Caulipower got frozen by a wind, which led to me losing that lawnmower as well. But as the final wave came in, once again there was no way I was winning this as the zombies in the bottom middle lane made it all the way. This level was definitely starting to feel impossible. The third attempt was a little different, not because I won or anything, but instead it's because we lost in a different lane, with that lane being the top middle one. The 4th attempt however was much different, and it gave me a lot of hope that this level was beatable without the use of any plant food or coins, because as we made it past the first big wave we still had our lawnmowers all intact, and if we just gotten a little bit more lucky the middle lawnmower also wouldn't have been lost. But still we made it to the final wave with 3 lawnmowers again still intact. And right here, if either of my surviving 2 Caulipower hypnotized that bucket head, we actually would have won, because it would have taken out most of the other zombies and we would have only had to deal with that one front zombie and then 2 of the ice throwers in the back. But since this didn't happen, the zombies in the very middle lane made it all the way. But looking back, if I wasn't so stingy and just bought 1 plant food, I actually would have beaten this level right here. But since I didn't, that led to a flurry of many attempts where my luck with the Caulipower hypnotizing the right zombies just wasn't good enough, and the final waves would end up looking like this. And at some point I was just restarting levels whenever I felt like I was about to lose, and I lost count, but this was probably close to my 20th attempt, and luck was thankfully on my side this time, because we made it past the first big wave still with 3 lawnmowers, and we got a little unlucky right before the very final wave as the zombies in the very front didn't get hit by my plant food. But thankfully I had a couple more plant food and it was able to get that one zombie that was about to take me out. But since the zombies in the front weren't being hit at that time, the zombies in the back were, so the final wave ended up looking like this. A very small amount of zombies that was possible to beat. I just needed the Caulipower to hit the right zombies, but as you can see it was definitely not doing that, and it was hitting all the zombies in the very back. And at this point I realized that I wasn't going to spend another hour on this level, so I finally gave in and decided to buy 1 plant food just for this level, because I knew it was possible, taking out these last 3 zombies and finally beating day 6. That was definitely a painful level, but don't worry, it gets much more painful pretty soon. Day 7, thankfully the game is very easy on sending the snowstorms, and though my plants were still being a little slow and not hitting the front zombies, we were still able to win on the first attempt. Day 9 was actually very similar and didn't have any snowstorms at all, mainly because it was the introduction level of the Dodo mechs, and I ended up losing my top 3 lawnmowers, but again, since my Caulipower weren't getting frozen this level, the power of them combined was able to take out the rest of the zombies pretty easily, and day 9 was beaten on the first attempt as well. But day 11 was the exact opposite, as the snowstorms pick up heavily and the number of zombies sent in this level is pretty insane as well. And normally in this level, the high amount of zombies are supposed to be countered with piercing plants because all of the zombies get funneled into one lane, which is that very bottom lane. But since I'm not allowed to use any piercing plants or other plants like the Hurricane and Charred Guard, this level suddenly becomes much tougher because more zombies make my RNG even worse, as it gives the Caulipower more targets to hit. So most of the time the zombies in the back end up getting hit and the front ones make it to the end without much problem. The level itself is long enough that I'm able to get down a pretty decent amount of Caulipower, but this is also countered by the crazy amount of snowstorms. And of course the snowstorms are sent in within the big waves, so right as I need my plants the most, they end up getting frozen and the zombies again make it to the end. And I didn't spend too much time going over every failed attempt on this level because this ended up being another level that I skipped for now and will be coming back to at the end of the run. So for now, we move on to day 12 where we first prep defenses. Day 13 by its looks is a pretty scary level because it has 4 flags and we have to protect these flowers in the back from being trampled on, and there's snowstorms that come in. But a good thing was that the flowers were in the very back, so it gave us some time to work with. And right after the second big wave was sent in, I was getting unlucky like usual in the top middle lane, so I had to launch a lawnmower to take out that zombie. But this ended up going badly for me as a buckethead later on in that same top middle lane made it all the way to my Caulipower, and I even plant fooded it to try and fend off the buckethead at the same time healing the Caulipower, but it wasn't able to get it and it got eaten. But quickly I planted another Caulipower as it recharged, but this one died even faster as it had 2 zombies eating it, so the buckethead eventually trampled the flowers. But that was just a very big RNG problem, and by the looks of it this level was very easily beatable. So I give it another try, and this time my plant food were thankfully hitting the right zombies. And as the final wave came in, we were looking pretty good, as the main boss this level is supposed to be a Gargantuar that catches you off guard in the very bottom lane as it throws its imps, but the Caulipower doesn't allow the Gargantuar to throw its imps, so it's basically a direct counter to the level's threat. So we won pretty easily on the second attempt. Day 15 is a nice level by the looks of it because they give us 2 pepper poults that warm our plants up, but at the same time it has 4 big waves and we have to protect the pepper poults as well. And it only takes a little bit of bad luck to make the pepper poults very vulnerable to being eaten, but it was looking pretty good as we made it to the third big wave and my plants were hitting the correct zombies. But very quickly everything went wrong as my top and bottom lane Caulipowers got frozen and a buckethead made it to my Caulipower in the bottom lane, very quickly taking it out. The second attempt was even worse as I didn't even make it to that third big wave and a couple of zombies got onto my pepper poult unexpectedly and they ate it. The third attempt, thankfully things went better as I made it to the third big wave, and as a buckethead got close to my pepper poult in the very top lane, a Caulipower was able to hypnotize it. And then as the final wave came in, it got a little scary in the very bottom lane as a buckethead and conehead made it to my pepper pool, but I launched my lawnmower taking them out. And with that, we had beaten day 15 on our third attempt. Day 17 was much nicer as it was a simple level with no special tasks and even better, very minimal snowstorms. And I always mention that pre-placed plants like the fume shroom and charred guards on this level are allowed, but even then I tried to only beat the levels using the max level plant, and that rule solely exists just in case the pre-placed plants get a hit or 2 off. That's why you always see me shoveling them as soon as possible. But that aside, I ended up losing a lawnmower in the very middle lane, but my army of Caulipower was pretty strongly built up as none of them got frozen, and the final wave got beaten pretty easily, and day 17 is defeated on the first try. Day 19 was definitely a weird one because 1, it didn't have any special tasks and it had a lot of frozen plants, so you would think that all the frozen plants would mean that a lot of zombies were going to be sent to this level, but there weren't. And so even though a couple of my Caulipowers got frozen throughout the level, the minimal number of zombies sent within the level made it pretty easy to beat even with these frozen plants. So we won pretty easily. Day 20 had 3 flags and also 3 redirection pads in the very middle lanes and some snowstorms that were constantly freezing my Caulipower, but my luck this level was pretty good as my plants were hypnotizing mostly the front zombies. And so even though there were a bunch of them at some points, we ended up getting getting pretty far. And if things seemed to get too close, I used the plant food and it took out the zombies in the very front. Everything kind of just worked my way and day 20 was beat. In day 22 at first, I was very worried because this is the level that introduces the weasel hoarders. And if you're somehow unfamiliar with the weasel hoarders, they're basically the chicken wranglers of the Frostbite Caves. And instead of chickens, they release weasels. But the number of them being sent was actually pretty minimal, so I was pretty luckily able to get them and they weren't proccing the other ones. Until the very final wave was sent in and 2 weasel hoarders got procced right off the bat. In the very top lane and bottom middle lane were good because of the lawnmowers, but the top middle lane was in danger as that didn't have a lawnmower in it. But thankfully that Caulipower held out long enough to where one of the weasels got hypnotized and it ate the other one. And somehow I beat this level on my first attempt. Day 23 has 3 flags, charred guards that we have to protect, and also weasels. But this level I wasn't actually too worried about the weasels or any other zombies, as the charred guard is a very good plant paired up with the Caulipower because it just buys the Caulipower more time to hypnotize the zombies. And it's good for the weasels as well because if the weasels get too close, I can just plant food power it and it's able to beat them, because even though it doesn't seem like it, the charred guard does do a little bit of damage. And as far as defensive plants go, charred guard might be my favorite. But that aside, day 23 was beaten really easily. Day 26 on the other hand wasn't easy at all because it had 3 main problems. 1 was the 4 big waves, 2 was the snowstorms, and 3, this time the weasels came in pretty big numbers. Oh, and of course there's a 4th one being bad RNG, which on the first attempt took me out very easily as for some reason my Caulipowers just didn't hit this front cone head. On the second attempt, a weasel hoarder in the bottom lanes got procced pretty early on, but my Caulipower were able to handle the weasel, but then 2 basic zombies started eating away at my Caulipower, so I launched a lawnmower to take him out. But launching that lawnmower was a problem as a couple more weasel hoarders got procced, and then I didn't have as good as luck with the weasel this time in that bottom middle lane, so I ate away at my Caulipower, eventually making it to the end. The third attempt was literally the same exact thing, but in the very bottom lane, as I first had to launch a mower for the basic zombies, and then a weasel hoarder got procced with the weasel in the very bottom lane who ate through my Caulipower, once again making it to the end by itself. The fourth attempt was identical to the third attempt as I first launched that mower for the basic zombie, and again the weasels got through, and this time even quicker because there were 2 of them. And after a couple more attempts, I'd kind of given up and realized that this level wouldn't be possible without the use of coins, so I put it up on the board with the other levels that we'd revisit. And you might be thinking that I'm putting so many levels up that I might not have enough coins to beat them all, but I promise you will be surprised by how many levels I do end up beating. And a little spoiler, this is one of the levels that I do beat, but for now I lost, and we move on to day 27, where thankfully no snowstorms, and we have to protect these 3 rotobagas against 4 big waves of zombies. But this level specializes in sending big tanky zombies in very little numbers, and since the tankiness of the zombies doesn't matter to the Caulipower, this level ends up being perfect. As one, we're able to get a pretty big army of them down as the level is pretty long, and all the tanky zombies that are sent just get instantly hypnotized, which leads to me beating day 27 on my very first attempt. Day 28 is a prep your defenses level, but it goes a little different than day 27. And this is due to the reason that I can't plant down all my Caulipower at once, since this level has a pretty decent amount of snowstorms that eventually freeze a ton of my Caulipower. And I ended up losing a lawnmower in the very top lane pretty early on, and since that Caulipower was frozen, when a weasel hoarder in that top lane got procced, the weasels actually just ran over that Caulipower all the way to the end without much of a threat to him. On the second attempt, however, things did go much better, as this time, when that same weasel hoarder got procced, my lawnmower in that top lane was still intact. In the very final wave, though it sent in a Gargantuar and a couple of weasel hoarders, none of them got procced because I instantly just plant food in my Caulipowers. And with that, we had beaten most of the Frostbite Caves using just a max level Caulipower, with only 2 levels that we'd revisit in the future. But for now, we move on to Lost City. In comparison to the previous worlds, is actually much easier, and most levels in this world were beaten on the very first attempt besides 2. So I'm going to mainly just focus on these 2 levels, as you can probably imagine how the rest of them went. And the first problematic level is day 20 because for some reason it's really fast paced, and it has the tent carrying imps who are very dangerous if we don't take care of them right away, so I have to use a lawnmower on it right at the beginning. The fast pacing of this level also makes makes it to where I only have 2 Caulipower down by the time the first big wave comes in, and launching that first lawnmower becomes problematic as a zombie eats through the plant in that very top lane, and as the hypnosis beam is traveling to it, makes it to the end but then gets hypnotized after, but of course we'd already lost by this point. On the second try, I was a little luckier with the Caulipowers and the hypnosis beams, but not lucky enough as another zombie in the top middle lane made it to the end. Again with the very same thing happening as it got hypnotized after it made it to the end. The third attempt was a little different as the tent carrying imp got hypnotized right away, so I didn't have to use the lawnmower in the beginning because the shovel zombie also got hypnotized and then took out the umbrella zombie behind it. But in the process, I lost the lawnmower in the bottom middle lane, and then as the zombie was eating one of my plants, I launched another one in the very bottom lane. And as the final wave was about to come in, this level was going very well because I only had the very 2 bottom lanes to worry about, but once again the Caulipower had to sell as an umbrella zombie in the bottom middle lane, ate through my first plant, and then I planted a second one to stall it even longer, but again they basically left it as one of the last zombies alive and it made it to the end. But this was a morale booster as it showed me that the level was completely possible. On the next try I made it to the final wave, but again I lost to a different umbrella zombie. But the next attempt, even though it started off weird, went much better because at first the tent imp actually made it to a gold tile, but the main difference this time was that my second Caulipower plant fooded right as I planted it, and thankfully my Caulipower in the bottom lane was able to hit the zombie in the top lane that was getting very close to my lawnmower, and even better my third Caulipower plant fooded as well, taking out most of the frontline zombies again. I did end up launching a lawnmower in the very top lane right before the final wave came in, but that was because I knew that there's no zombies sent in that top lane in the final wave. And as the final wave came in, I had lawnmowers in each lane that does send zombies for the final wave, but this time the zombies that were getting too close were getting hypnotized at the right time. And just like that, we had beaten day 20. The next semi-problematic level was day 24, and this actually isn't one of the levels that I was talking about in the beginning of Lost City, but I thought I should mention it as it was a challenge level in which we had to protect these flowers in the back from being trampled on. And it was going well for the most part until these Indiana Jones zombies leaped in, and the middle one kind of just ended up evading all of the attacks from my plants and made it over the flowers. On the second try, I made sure that this didn't happen as right as it landed, I launched my mower to take it out. One in the top was getting close as well, but then I plant fooded, taking it out as well. And after this, we beat day 24 pretty easily. But now on to one of the real annoying levels of Lost City, which was day 27. And this level didn't have any special challenges or tasks to complete, but once again, similarly to day 20, was a nuisance because of its fast pacing, as by the time the second big wave was sent in, I only had 2 Caulipower down, and I ended up losing 4 of my lawnmowers before the final wave was even sent in, losing my 5th one on that final wave. And there was just too many zombies on the screen, so they eventually made it through in a few lanes. On the second try, I didn't even make it to the final wave as my plant food missed this dragonfly zombie. On the third attempt, like attempt 1, I made it to that final wave, but then got overwhelmed once again. Same on the fourth. On the 5th attempt, RNG was thankfully in my favor, as I lost 2 lawnmowers in the very 2 top lanes, but throughout the rest of the level, the Caulipower were doing very well in defending themselves and targeting the frontline zombies, which in turn damaged the zombies behind them and bought the Caulipower more time to hypnotize the other zombies. And due to their better targeting, we ended up beating the level, having 6 of our Caulipowers still on the map alongside 3 lawnmowers. It's insane how important the Caulipower's targeting is, but as that was the final challenging level of Lost City, we skipped straight to day 30, where there are mold colonies, but they aren't too much of a problem for Caulipower as it has full map range. And things got a little close in the very bottom lane with the shovel zombie, but thankfully one of the Caulipowers was able to hypnotize it at the last second, with that only leaving zombies in lanes with lawnmowers, meaning that we had beaten all of Lost City using just a max level Caulipower. And next up, we actually have some even easier worlds. And I say worlds because it's both of the and I'm combining as well as super speeding through the far future and the dark ages because they're the 2 easiest worlds of this entire challenge besides ancient Egypt. The far future is pretty obvious as it's one of the worlds that we speed through usually in every run, since the power tiles are basically a help to every plant and they make fending off the zombies very easy. The dark ages on the other hand could be a little surprising, but normally it's only difficult because of the existence of jester zombies. But since the Caulipower isn't countered by the jester, this world becomes pretty easy as well, and every level is defended against very easily. And with that, we had beaten all of Far Future and the Dark Ages using just the max level Caulipower. Next up, The Neon Mixtape tour, we definitely go to the levels being difficult again, and it's not because of any special challenges or tasks, but mainly due to the crazy amount of zombies sent within some of the levels. Days 1 and 2 didn't send in too many zombies, so they were both beaten pretty easily. Day 4, however, you'll start to see things get a little bit messy because we start seeing compact hordes of zombies like these towards the middle that end up making it all the way because the Caulipower just aren't good enough to defeat them. And by the time the final wave was coming in, I'd lost 4 of my lawnmowers with the only one in the bottom lane remaining. But thankfully the number of zombies had dwindled as well, so taking out this final bucket head, we beat day 4 on the first attempt. In day 5, we have to protect these walnuts and fat beets, but we ended up doing it pretty easily. Day 7 on the other hand was a horrific one, because as soon as my Caulipower takes out this first zombie, there's 2 mohawks sent in kicking through the air. And if it was just these 2, it would have been easy to deal with, but a couple seconds later 2 more are sent alongside 2 cone heads as well. And since my RNG was pretty bad on this first attempt, those first 2 mohawks made it all the way to the lawnmowers, and then I tried recuperating, but there was a mohawk zombie getting pretty close to the end in that first big wave, so I placed a Caulipower right in front of it, but as soon as that mohawk got close, Zomboss started playing music, so my Caulipower absolutely got destroyed, and with nothing else in its way, that mohawk eventually made it to the end. On the second try, again, my Caulipower decided that it didn't want to hit the front 2 mohawks, so they both made it to the lawnmowers, and this time I made it a little farther by beating that first big wave, but a little later a horde of zombies that was even bigger than the big wave was sent in, and at this point in the level there was really nothing I could do. The 4th attempt practically went the same exact way, and the 5th attempt as well, and at this point I decided that this was one of the levels that I was going to revisit at the end of the video. Day 8 at first also scared me because it sent off a mohawk zombie right at the start and then a second one right after, but the rest of the pacing was slow enough that I was able to get down 3 Caulipower by the time the first big wave came in. But the zombies did end up getting one in the very top lane and also the one in the very middle lane, and of course the lawnmowers with it. And of course right after, my RNG was letting me down heavily as it wasn't targeting the bucket heads in the very front, so the ones in the very middle lane kind of mopped up, destroying my Caulipower, and as we reached the final wave they made it to the end of the lawn, taking me out on my very first attempt. But this level looked much more possible than day 7 because it was just an RNG problem, and a couple of different things I did this time was using my plant food to try to preserve the Caulipowers that I'd already placed down, and this actually allowed me to get down 4 Caulipower and not lose any lawnmowers when the second big wave came in. And right before the final wave was about to come in, a group of zombies in that very top middle lane were getting close to my Caulipower, so I used a mower launch to take care of them because I felt like preserving that Caulipower was more important than the lawnmower. And by this point we'd made it past basically all the risky zombies, and the only lane I had to worry about was the top middle one, and when it seemed to be getting close I had a plant food stocked up, so I used it last second, leaving 1 bucket head, and as it got taken out we beat day 8. Day 12 was pretty contrasting to day 7 and 8 because it was kind of easy just throughout the entire level. There weren't too many zombies sent at once, so my Caulipower were able to handle them all by themselves, and I think it's mainly due to the reason that this is the level that the Gargantuar is introduced in, so the game kind of takes it easy on the basic zombies because they're sending in a Gargantuar, and that of course is an ideal situation for the Caulipower. Day 13 I prepped defenses. Day 15, I had to protect these 5 fat beets, and I ended up having to launch a mower in the very middle lane, but that was the extent of the difficulty, so day 15 was beat pretty easily. Day 17 started off pretty slow, but then very quickly picked up the pace, sending in all these imps at once, and these guys did end up overwhelming me, taking 3 of my lawnmowers, but then as the final wave came in, it only sent in 5 bucket heads and 5 breakdancer zombies, so the second half of the level ended up being much easier, and day 17 was beat. Day 18 was a weird one because it only had 1 flag, so I thought that maybe the game would send in an insane amount of zombies at once, but it didn't, and they were kind of spread out, so I ended up beating the level pretty easily. Day 20 was pretty simple for the most part, but then towards the end a few microphone whippers got very close to my Caulipower, taking one of them out with the lawnmower, and it was seeming like RNG wasn't in my favor, so I kind of gave in as I didn't want to lose, so I bought a plant food using it at the very end as it took out the microphone whipper, and as this bucket head was the only zombie left, we beat day 20 as well with the help of buying 1 plant food. Day 21 was was definitely a dangerous one as we had to protect these flowers towards the back from being trampled on, and the most annoying zombies this time were definitely the breakdancers as they just kick forward all the zombies, which in turn gives my Caulipower less time to hypnotize them. And due to this, a couple of zombies in the bottom middle lane made it all the way, trampling the flowers. On the second try, things went much better as my Caulipower's plant food powers and normal hypnosis was targeting the correct zombies. And as I made it to the very final wave, I realized that I'd won because I sent in a pretty minimal amount of zombies who were all quickly put under our spell. Day 23 is a pretty scary one as well as it introduces the arcade pushers, and the arcade pushers are problematic because the arcade itself spawns zombies very similarly to the 10 temp of Lost City, but this time we don't have the choice of stopping them and they kind of just spawn in zombies right as they walk onto the map. So the best method we have of destroying the arcades is the zombies that come out of it get hypnotized and then eat the machine itself, or a zombie makes it all the way to the lawnmower taking out the machine as well. And I was honestly surprised that the arcade didn't end up overwhelming me this level because we made it to the final wave with 4 of our mowers still intact, and then I was getting pushed pretty heavily in the lane that didn't have a lawnmower, but very luckily the Caulipower that I planted down plant fooded on placement, taking out most of them and hypnotizing the last zombie. We beat day 23 on the first try. Day 24 we once again prep defenses. Day 25, we go back to normal and it's once again another level that only has one big wave. And this time, the number of zombies in the final wave are definitely higher than last time, but they were still definitely manageable if my RNG hadn't let me down in the bottom middle lane where I didn't have a lawnmower. And I couldn't risk buying a plant food here either because there's too many zombies on the screen and it might have taken multiple. So the zombie from the arcade machine ended up beating me on this first attempt. On the second try, we actually made it to the final wave without losing a singular lawnmower, so it was impossible for us to lose. And after losing all 5 of my lawnmowers, day 25 was beaten. Day 26, however, was definitely one of the more painful levels in the Neon Mixtape tour, and I'm not even going to waste any time going over this level because this is another level that I put up on the chalking board and we'll revisit it at the end. Day 28 wasn't an easy one either because it introduced these boombox zombies who, if given the chance, would just hypnotize your Caulipowers, immobilizing them and allowing the zombies to take the lawnmowers in return. And in between the first big wave and the final wave, there's a lot of boombox zombies sent at once, so they immobilized all my Caulipower, and this one Mohawk in the very middle made it to the end as my Caulipower missed their hypnosis on it. The second attempt started off pretty similar as I lost a couple of my lawnmowers to the basic zombies, but I did make it past the insane amount of boombox zombies, and now all that was left was the very final wave to defeat. And since it sent in a pretty minimal amount of zombies, it seemed pretty doable with these 3 Caulipower, but one of them got whipped in the very top, and I noticed the number of zombies was pretty close to 5, so one plant food could take them out, so I almost bought one right here, but my Caulipower recharged, so I placed it down up there again. But at this point, I'd been playing this challenge for so long, I didn't want to risk it, so I bought the plant food, thankfully taking out the rest of the zombies, beating day 28. And that had kind of become my rule at this point because I'd been doing this challenge for so long, and I was just trying to save any time I could. So any time that I saw that I was at the very end and it would only take one plant food to take out the rest of the zombies, I would go for it. But that aside, day 29 started off pretty easy and I made it to the final wave without losing a singular lawnmower, so my victory was technically guaranteed, and after losing 4 of my mowers, we beat day 29. And now we'd made it to the final level that we play of the Neon Mixtape tour, which was day 30. And it starts off slow with the microphone whippers, but right after sends in the breakdancers to ruin my day. And ruin my day they did, as this microphone whipper breakdancer combo made it all the way to my Caulipower in the bottom lane, taking it out, and then also a lawnmower with them. And I tried saving the one in the very top lane by launching a mower, but I was too late and it took out the Caulipower and I lost my mower as well. And after losing my last 2 mowers, I realized that this attempt might be a little cooked, and it kept on getting worse because I lost another Caulipower to a Mohawk, and eventually this Mohawk made it to the end, taking me out. That was definitely a series of unfortunate events. The second attempt thankfully went a little bit smoother because this time my plants decided to hit the microphone whippers before they got too close. And thankfully when they did get too close, their music had stopped, so they weren't insta-killing my Caulipowers, making me only lose 3 of my lawnmowers instead of all 5 like last time. And as the final wave came in, we had 5 Caulipower down, and the final wave itself didn't send in too many zombies, so as we're about to hypnotize them all, we had now beaten most of the Neon Mixtape tour using just Caulipower with only 2 levels that we needed to revisit after. But it gets painfully worse in the And there's really only one main factor that makes the Jurassic Marsh one of the worst worlds for the Caulipower, and it's the dinosaurs within it. Every dinosaur has an ability that makes the zombies in some way faster by either kicking them forward or just super speeding them. And the faster the zombies are, the more detrimental it is for the Caulipowers, because one, the recharge takes forever, and then they also have less time to do their attacks. But even with that, days 2, 4, and 5 were all beaten without much problem. Day 6 for the most part wasn't too scary, but there was a problem because we lost the lawnmower in the very middle lane towards the beginning, and then towards the end there was a cone head that wasn't getting hypnotized by my Caulipower, and it seemed like it was about to beat me, so I panic bought a plant food, but then I actually didn't end up needing it as one of my hypnosis beams hit it. So I did kind of waste 1,000 coins there, but it's okay. Day 8 we beat without losing a single lawnmower. Day 10 had 3 flags, and there was definitely a couple of scary instances within the level. The first was this cone head in the top middle lane, almost making it to the very end because there wasn't a lawnmower, but my Caulipower was able to hypnotize it last second. And then right after, there was a basic zombie in the very top lane who's going to make it to the end, but I placed a Caulipower to body block it, and it ended up eating that Caulipower, but thankfully one of the other ones hit it last second, saving us one more time. And with only a couple of zombies left on the map, one of my Caulipowers that I planted insta-plant fooded, and we beat day 10. Day 11 we beat without much problem. Same with day 12, but day 13 went a little differently because a couple of zombies made it to the end, taking my lawnmowers towards the middle of the level, and then about 15 seconds later, another basic zombie in the middle lane made it all the way to the end because my Caulipower refused to hit it. On the second attempt, my RNG was a little better, so we made it to the final wave with 3 mowers still intact, and with this one last zombie in the top lane being hypnotized by my Caulipower, we beat day 13. Day 15 has 2 flags, and we have to protect these primal walnuts in the middle, and things started getting a little scary as I started losing a ton of my lawnmowers right before the final wave was about to be sent in, but the final wave itself had pretty minimal zombies, so we ended up beating them pretty easily. Day 17 has 2 flags, and for the first 90% of the level is pretty easy, but by the time the final wave is sent in, all the zombies overwhelmed my Caulipowers, but thankfully I had all my mowers intact as well, so they carried me to victory. And you might be thinking that I mentioned that the Jurassic Marsh was one of the most difficult worlds, and we haven't had any difficulty really, but day 18 is where this starts to change because we're introduced to the T-Rex dinosaur who super speeds the zombies in its lane. And normally the strategy against these guys is wall plants or just cheap plants that you can place right in front of the super speeded zombies, because once they touch a plant they slow down again. But of course we can't offer up any of our Caulipowers as sacrifices because that'd just make us lose in the long run. And from day 18 and onwards, there's going to be 4 levels that we put aside and then revisit at the end, so I won't be going over each and every failed attempt on those levels, and I'll just mention them and then we'll come back to them later. And day 18 was the first of these levels, and the next 3 were days 21, 23, and lastly 25, but 25 has a different reason because it also adds the Ankylosaurus dinosaur, who, if you don't have a plant in front of the zombies path that are getting launched by the Ankylosaurus, they basically get launched to the end of the map. But like I said, we'll be revisiting these 4 levels at the end. And since I've mentioned all 4 of the levels, you could probably assume that I beat the rest of the levels that were in the Jurassic Marsh, but I'll still go over them briefly because we did end up losing on day 26 in the very top lane because the Ankylosaurus launched a couple of zombies that first took the lawnmower, and then the next ones made it all the way to the end. And then a zombie leaked in the very bottom lane. The third attempt had the same outcome as the first attempt, but thankfully on my 4th attempt, my Caulipower finally had good RNG and actually hit that one imp that was in that very top lane. And that was basically the only main threat, so we ended up beating day 26 on this 4th attempt. Day 27, we get a little break with the prepare your defenses level. Day 28, we go back to normal with 2 flags and still the annoying dinosaurs, and at some points in the level the zombies did feel a little overwhelming, but my RNG was pretty good, and with the help of the lawnmowers we're able to minimize the number of zombies, so the final wave ended up being pretty easy with only one scary instance in the very top lane because the cone head was eating through that Caulipower. But as those 2 in the top lane were the last of the zombies, my Caulipower focused them and we beat day 28 on the first attempt. And now we're on day 30 which is the last level that we play of the Jurassic Marsh. And the zombies were being sent in small hordes throughout the entire level. And by the time we made it to the final wave, we had 5 Caulipower down and all 5 lawnmowers intact, guaranteeing our success. And with that, we had beaten a pretty good chunk of Jurassic Marsh using just the max level Caulipower with only 4 levels that we needed to revisit. And Caulipower performs a little bit better in Big Wave Beach, weirdly enough, is one of the easier worlds in this entire challenge because of how slow the zombies come in. And there's a cool mechanic with the Caulipower. Since it's floating slash flying, you don't need lily pads to place it on top of, and it can just hover over the water, making it pretty difficult to take out. So I'm super speeding all the way to the level where it becomes a little bit difficult because about 80% of this world is very easy, and the difficulty starts to set in on day 25, where we once again have that challenge where we have to defeat a certain amount of zombies in a certain amount of time. And honestly, I thought this level was going to be impossible at first because I couldn't really figure out how to get enough zombies hypnotized in that time, since using our plant food doesn't count as defeating a zombie, and 10 zombies in 5 seconds is very difficult. But on my second attempt, I had a genius idea. I planted 2 Caulipower down in the very back, with the third one when things started getting a little close with some of the surfboarders. And the main goal of these Caulipower is to just preserve our lawnmowers. And right before the final wave is about to come in, there's also a low tide that brings in a ton of zombies at once. And right as this low tide came in, I shoveled my Caulipower as fast as I could. And my strategy that I came up with was using the lawnmowers and timing them perfectly to where I could defeat 10 zombies in 5 seconds using just them. And at first it looked like the strategy failed because the bar went back down to basically 0 and I only had 2 mowers left. But as the 2 mowers launched and defeated the zombies, we actually ended up killing 10 zombies with those 2. And now all we had to do was take care of these 3 zombies, 2 of which got launched by the plant food, and this Lot Gargantuar was just hypnotized with the normal Caulipower's attack, and we beat day 25 on our second attempt. I was pretty surprised by that outcome. Day 27, 28, and 29 were all beaten pretty easily, but day 30 was once again a level that we had to put to the side to revisit it after beating modern day, because even though the Caulipower are pretty good against the fishermen since the water can't take them out, the real problem starts to set in when zombies like the surfboarders and the octos are sent in that can either cover or just one-shot the Caulipower. And because of this is a level that we'd revisit in the future, and for now we'd beaten most of Big Wave Beach using just a max level Caulipower. But that aside, we see a couple of our old enemies in modern day. For the most part, isn't too difficult of a world, but there are 4 levels in here that caused a little bit of problem. The first of which was day 7 that has the octo zombie spam, so all my Caulipower ended up getting covered with octopus, and the zombies were easily able to make it to the end on my first attempt. On the second attempt, I knew I was going to need a plant food within the final wave where all the octopus are sent, so I bought one and then instantly used it on a Caulipower, which thankfully took out most of the octopus. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't feel like losing, so I bought another plant food to get rid of these final zombies. And even then, it looked like we were about to lose, but very luckily, one of my Caulipower recharged, and right as I planted it, it plant fooded, taking out the rest of the zombies. The next annoying level is day 10, and I'm not gonna spend any time on it. It's basically just crazy zombie spam, which I won't be able to defeat without buying plant food. So for now, it's being put aside. The third problematic level at first was day 23, and it was once again a level that had the octo zombies that would just end up covering my Caulipowers, so I lost on the first attempt. On the second try, however, I had a plant food that I used as soon as the octo zombies came in, and they instantly got taken out before they could cover all my Caulipowers. And with that simple choice, day 23 was beaten pretty easily on the second try. And now onto the last of the annoying levels, which is day 30, where we have to protect these flowers in the very front from being trampled on. And normally the main problem in these levels is the all-star zombie, but this time I'd say that every zombie in this level is a problem since the flowers are so far forward, and the Caulipower just don't have enough time to defeat them without the help of coins being used. So this is another level that we're putting aside. But that means that we're now on the technical last level that we play of the entire challenge, which is modern day 31. And compared to the previous 4 levels that I just shown you, this one was extremely easy as we didn't lose a single lawnmower. And with that, we had gone through all of modern day, but now Caulipower has to go on its The Revenge Arc consists of 16 levels that I deemed unbeatable without buying plant food. And now, with almost 36,000 coins saved up, I would be going back to all these levels and trying to beat them. Of course, with the first level being day 22 of Pirate Seas, which has an overwhelming amount of imps that are shot out of the cannons. Well, this isn't actually the first level that we tried to beat because I was still trying to be smart with my plant food usage, so I attempted this level as a refresher of just how difficult it was, and this attempt made me realize that I'd have to buy too much plant food and it might be more worth it to test out the other levels first. And that's exactly what I did, skipping straight to day 11 of Frostbite Caves. I didn't even try to go for the Wild West levels yet because I knew that the chickens were one of the worst ones to go up against, and I was confident that if played right, the Frostbite Caves levels wouldn't take too many coins to beat. And this was definitely still a scary task because if I bought plant food at the wrong time, I would just be wasting it. And day 11 was the perfect example of this because I was hesitant to use any coins until I was sure that I had the perfect run. And in reattempting this level, I started to realize that there was some strategy that I could employ. Like if you notice there's a wind that came through when the first zombie was about halfway through the map, which half froze my Caulipower. So I chose to restart and then take advantage of this knowledge, letting that first zombie get halfway through and then planting my first Caulipower afterwards. This just allows the Caulipower to survive one extra wave of the winds from being frozen. But that strategy alone wasn't going to be nearly enough, and I had some pretty bad RNG here, so I decided to restart again because in order to get the perfect run on this level, I would need to employ different strategies and different placements of the Caulipower alongside the RNG being on my side. And on this attempt, the RNG was on my side as that Caulipower on the bottom lane was safe from the zombies. But as the second big wave came in, that RNG quickly ran out, as even after using a plant food, the two zombies on top of the bottom lane Caulipower didn't get wiped away. And so they ate through the Caulipower and took the lawnmower behind it. And even worse, all while that was happening, my other two plants got frozen as well. So this attempt was cooked. On the next try, I implemented another strategy, which was placing the Caulipower in that top middle lane. And this was due to the reason that placing the Caulipower in the very bottom lane put it in threat to that very front zombie if it didn't get hypnotized right away. And this strategy technically saved me one Caulipower, but at the same time cost me my lawnmower if that zombie wasn't hit. So I tried the same placement a couple more times, but the Caulipower kept on hitting a different zombie. And you might have noticed here that the Caulipower is only able to get off one shot before that front zombie reaches the lawnmower. And this is pretty important because if you look at the snowstorm that's about to come in, the very top lane snowstorm goes by sooner than the ones in the lanes underneath them, which means that I can get down my Caulipower sooner in the very top lane and not have it half frozen compared to the lanes underneath. And like I mentioned earlier, at first it was only able to get down one shot, but with this placement it's able to get down two shots before that front zombie reaches the lawnmower. And on this attempt I actually ended up hitting the first zombie with the second shot. This basically makes it to where I have double the chance to save my lawnmower. And even though this seems like a pretty decent strategy for the early game, there is a problem with it in the fact that there's two windstorms in that top lane that freeze that Caulipower pretty fast. So after a couple more tries with the same strategy, I actually changed my placement to the very middle lane for the first Caulipower, and in the long run for this level, this placement is better if that Caulipower ends up hitting the very front zombie. So after a couple of tries, it did exactly that, hitting the front zombie, now creating momentum for my other placements. And for the most part, you want to keep the Caulipower in the middle three lanes because the top and bottom lane for some reason just have extra snowstorms in this level. But then comes in the problem of a snowstorm going past that middle lane and freezing all of your Caulipower at once. And the game didn't even have a chance to do that to me, as the buckethead in the bottom lane made it all the way to the end. And then I was stuck in a constant loop of my first Caulipower not hitting that very front zombie, instead targeting the back ones every time. And this kind of just kept on happening over and over again. But while doing these attempts, I realized that if you place the Caulipower right at the tail end of the snowstorm, even in this placement, it's able to get off two shots before that front one makes it all the way to the lawnmower. But even still, my luck was really bad. But finally, after several attempts, it hit that front zombie. And now everything seemed to be in place for my strategy to finally start working. And I decided that this placement of the Caulipower of the three in the middle was still the best, missed, because though they'd all get frozen at the same exact time, that actually doesn't end up happening until right before the final wave is sent in. So these three will survive until then, which is pretty good as they can take out most of the zombies. And by the time that they do get frozen, I will have other Caulipower on the map as well. Having 5 Caulipower by the time the third big wave was sent in, things seemed to be going pretty well. There was just this mini horde of zombies that I wasn't too sure about, so I launched a mower to get rid of them because it seemed like a good decision at the time. And right after, those middle Caulipower got frozen alongside the one in the very bottom lane, but this was still okay because I had 3 others to work with. And even better, I still had 4 of my lawnmowers that were usable. And right here, it would have been better for us if we preserved that mower in the bottom lane until all the zombies were on the map, since they all get funneled down to there. But it felt like the run wasn't going to get any better than this, and now would be the time to buy my plant food, which is exactly what I did, buying one and using it as soon as the first big wave came in, and then buying a second one as well, which very unluckily after using it took out mainly the zombies that weren't much of a threat. And it seemed like I was gonna need to buy a third one, and I was prepared having my cursor over the plant food button, but last second one of the bucket heads got hypnotized, stalling all of the other zombies in the bottom lane, which gave the Caulipower more time to hypnotize the others. And in doing this, I didn't have to buy any more plant food, and we ended up beating Frostbite Caves using just 2,000 coins. Only using 2,000 coins definitely made it worth strategizing over all those failed attempts. But this was only one of 16 levels to beat. And the second level of the Frostbite Caves, day 26, had the different gimmick of the Weasel Hoarders. And again, I wasn't too quick on buying plant food, doing a couple of test runs on this level, because this level mainly depended on the timing. And by timing, I mean me figuring out at what points in the level the Weasel Hoarders are sent in, and trying to use my plant food at the perfect moment to where they kind of get wiped out and can't release their weasels in time. But of course, this first attempt was cooked, and a cone head made it all the way to the end pretty easily. And on this level, there isn't really any strategy I can talk about because it's mainly just RNG and what my Caulipower ends up hitting. And I ended up losing just because of bad RNG about 7 times, but on the 8th attempt, things were in my favor because one, this Weasel Hoarder in the bottom middle lane got hypnotized right before a mower was about to reach it, and if the mower had reached it, it would have released the weasels onto the other 2 adjacent lanes, taking their mowers as well. But I ended up losing those lawnmowers anyways because the weasels broke out another Weasel Hoarder, which took the lawnmowers. But believe it or not, this was still working in our favor as I had a plant food to take care of all of these zombies, except of course for the one cone head that was in the very front, and I had to buy a plant food for it because I felt like this was the right run to buy plant food on. And I say that this was the correct run because the only Weasel Hoarders now left on this level were the frozen ones, and the timing right here was crazy because I pre-plant fooded my Caulipower, and as soon as the Weasel Hoarder got broken out, it got launched by the Caulipower. If the hypnotized zombie had even hit it once, I would have lost. And somehow the same exact thing happened to the second frozen Weasel Hoarder. That worked out extremely well in my favor, and now we only had these zombies on the map to deal with, which means that we had beaten this level only using 1,000 coins and buying 1 plant food. That was definitely a success. The next level that we tackle is Neon Mixtape Tour Day 7, and this was actually probably the weirdest of the levels because I remember when I first tried it, it seemed impossible, but this time for some reason after a couple of attempts, my RNG just seemed to be perfect, hitting all the correct zombies for me to win, and I actually ended up beating this level without the need of buying a plant food, and that was definitely good news. 3 levels out of 16 had been beaten, with the 4th level being day 26 of the Neon Mixtape Tour. And the strategy with this level is always the same in the beginning, letting the Mohawk kickers kick the Spore Shroom back, as it just gives us more time and space to work with. But this level was extremely RNG dependent because if my Caulipower didn't hit the correct zombies, a simple zombie like the Buckethead in the top lane could wipe out 1 Spore Shroom and I'd lose. And this went on for about 15 minutes of failed attempts until I finally landed on a run that the RNG was in my favor. The microphone whippers were getting hypnotized at the correct times, as well as the front zombies. I did launch a mower in the top middle lane because the arcade zombies were getting a little too close for my comfort, and the rest of the wave went by pretty smoothly, and once again we didn't have to buy any plant food. I was actually getting pretty shocked by these results because my RNG the first time around was atrocious. For the 5th level, we bounced to modern day 10 because it seemed like the easiest one of the remainders, as it was purely an RNG type of level level because if I got the correct zombies hypnotized, they could just take care of the rest of the level. And the only problem in the early game of this level is the weasel hoarder in the bottom middle lane, but thankfully we only lost one lawnmower to them this time, leaving the other 4 for any other remaining zombies. And with all the tanky zombies being hypnotized, the other zombies weren't much of a threat to them, and we once again beat a level without the need of buying a plant food. But don't worry, I paid back for not buying any plant food on modern day 30, because right after the second big wave was sent in, I went to buy plant food and got distracted, not realizing the Caulipower in the very top lane had gotten eaten. So I actually ended up buying 3 plant food and didn't use any of it, completely just wasting 3,000 coins. And as you can see on the screen, I kind of just skipped the level afterwards, realizing that it'd be better to do the other levels first. But Big Wave Beach day 30 again wasn't the correct choice, and I was on this level for a pretty long time trying to strategize just how I would beat it, and I couldn't really figure it out, even wasting 1,000 coins in the process. Eventually deciding that this was another level that I was gonna put aside once again and just go on to the other levels. The next level we tackle is day 14 of the Wild West, which has the chickens, and the strategy on this level was getting the timing down of when the chicken wranglers came in and then using my plant food at the correct time to get rid of them before they got procced. And there was once again about 13 minutes of failed attempts until I finally landed on this run, where I basically knew when and where the perfect time to plant food would be. And there was actually a pretty weird strategy to this level where I only use one Caulipower, and this was because I didn't want to hypnotize any unnecessary zombies, because the hypnotized zombies walk off the map and then sometimes proc the chicken wranglers like one did in this top middle lane. So I ended up losing 2 of my lawnmowers, and then right after saw another chicken wrangler in the very top lane, and at this point the level looked cooked, so I almost restarted but kept going because I had a small feeling that it was still possible. And the problem here is the chicken in the top lane is going to eat through my Caulipower, hitting the lawnmower and then procking that chicken wrangler in the back, but I got pretty lucky that my Caulipower hit the chicken wrangler before the mower got to it. And since I had my recharge up for another Caulipower, I placed it down, buying a plant food and then using that plant food on it, thankfully getting the 2 chicken wranglers that were on the map. And now it was only the final wave, and I was familiar that in the final wave every lane is sent a chicken wrangler in it. So I bought 1 plant food to prepare and used it on the Caulipower, but this did not get rid of all the chicken wranglers, so I bought another plant food using it right away, and this did get rid of all of them. And now with only these 2 zombies left, I planted the second Caulipower because there was no risk, and we had finally beaten day 14. Day 18 is a pretty interesting one because it's a prep your defenses level, and we're given a pretty good amount of Caulipower that we can place down, but all these Caulipower are actually bad for us because they proc all the chicken wranglers. So I implemented the same strategy that I used on day 14, only having down 1 Caulipower and just consistently plant fooding it to get rid of the chicken wranglers. But if you're unfamiliar with day 18, it has an insane amount of chicken wranglers, which of course would mean that we're gonna have to use a pretty insane amount of plant food to get rid of them all. And at first I was thinking maybe like 5 or 6 plant food, but in the end I actually spent 15,000 coins on just this level. But thankfully we did beat it. And next up I jumped to day 23 of the Wild West, but lost the chicken wranglers and quickly realized that maybe this wasn't the level that I want to try to defeat right now. So I jumped to the Jurassic Marsh. And unlike the Frostbite Cave or Wild West levels, there isn't really any strategy to the Jurassic Marsh ones, and you kind of just have to power through them using coins. And day 18 we beat using 3,000 coins. Day 21, over a couple of failed attempts, I realized that it might be possible without the need of spending coins. And to my luck, it actually was. And very surprisingly, day 23 was the exact same, and I was able to beat it only losing 1 lawnmower and not spending any coins. But I did make a little oopsie right here, and I ended up playing day 24 even though it was one of the levels we already beat. And normally it wouldn't have been a problem, but I thought that I should mention it since I actually ended up buying 1 plant food to defeat this level for a second time, since I didn't realize that I wasn't even on the correct level. But this 1,000 coins that I just spent doesn't make too big of a difference, and there aren't like any extra levels that I could have beaten with that 1,000 coins. But now going on to the real level that I was supposed to play, we once again ended up just having extremely good RNG and beat it without the need of buying any plant food. I was genuinely really surprised with the Jurassic Marsh levels because they seemed impossible at first, but they all ended up being pretty easy. What wasn't easy was this Pirate Seas day 22 that we had now come back to. And without much thought, I kind of just went went for it, buying plant food whenever I felt like I needed it. And by the time we're approaching the final wave, I'd already drained my bank and had 950 coins left. And I would have been extremely sad if using all my coins didn't allow me to beat this level, but there was a little bit of strategy put into using the plant food at the time that I did, because it allowed me to preserve all of my lawnmowers until all the imps were now on the map, and this guaranteed my win against them. But this win also meant that I didn't have enough coins to defeat the rest of the levels that hadn't been beat yet, and the levels that hadn't been beat were now only Wild West days 23 and 24, and also Big Wave Beach day 30 alongside Modern Day day 30. So the total of unbeaten levels dropped from 16 to only 4, which is honestly, in my opinion, pretty crazy. So Caulipower was basically able to beat most of the game just by itself. And so far, this has probably been the most challenging yet fun solo plant level challenge that I've done. But now the video's come to an end, and let me know what other plants I should try. Okay, bye bye.